Hi, everybody. Sorry about that silence for a long time. I wasn't sure if we were allowed to start, but thank you, everybody, for joining us for this Creative Month panel with the team from Turn and Patience and Purpose. Before we get started, I really wanted everybody who is listening and everybody who's getting ready to speak about the project, just take a moment so that we can all just pay our respects and honor the people that we've lost, the Black people and the trans women that we've lost this year due to violence that was unnecessary. I'm going to be just reading their names during that time. If everybody can just take a moment, as I said, and just reflect, that'd be really, really appreciated. So Ahmaud Aubrey, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Yassine Mohammed, Dustin Parker, Nulissa Ruiz, Yampi Orocho, Monica Diamond, Lexi from Harlem, Johanna Metzger, Serena Ramos, Layla Sanchez, Penelope Ramirez, Nina Pop, and Healy J. O'Regan. Thanks, everybody. So before we get started on the questions, I would love for everyone to introduce themselves. I'll start first. My name is Blake Desarmeaux. I'm a strategist, currently unemployed due to COVID, but previously I've been at a few agencies, BBH, Big Spaceship, and my pronouns are they, them, theirs. I'm really excited to get this conversation going, and I'll just pass the mic along to Patrick.
Hi, everybody. This is Patrick Lipinski, ACD of Social at Patience and Purpose, and my pronouns are he, him, and his.
Hi, I'm Spencer Ostrander, and I'm the photographer for the project, and my pronouns are he, him, his.
Hi, my name is Nora Travis. I'm an SVP ACD at Patience and Purpose, and my pronouns are she and her.
Hi, I'm Jordan Smith. I am the project coordinator for the Turn study. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I also just wanted to say that Tony McDade, a Black trans man, was another person lost yesterday to police violence in Tallahassee. And I wanted to say his name.
And we might have another person joining us later on. His name is Julian, and Julian will be joining us shortly, most likely. But before we get started, let's begin with some videos from the campaign, and then we'll really get into the meat and potatoes. So we'll start, just give me a moment to share my screen with everybody. I practiced this and I've already kind of forgotten. Okay.
Love is a fool. I've been in love many times, but I think the greatest love of all is the love I have for myself. Because I have so much love for myself, I can love others. And I'm really confident in my ability to receive love and extra confident in my ability to give love. Love feels like armor. Oh, it's like that hug, that grasp.
The love question is always hard. We often come to a point where we accept that romantic love might not ever be a part of our lives. And so then, what do you do with that part of yourself? And I always say that I pour that love back into my community. So I guess I would say I'm in love with trans women everywhere. And that feels like wanting them to be safe at all times, worrying about them at all times, wanting them to be happy, loving to see them smile, makes me smile. Everything I do is for them.
All right.
As a trans woman of color, you're constantly relearning how to live in this world. Every day feels like a new experience. And a lot of times as a trans woman of color, I don't feel safe. And it kind of shapes the way that I move through the rest of the city. I've had Black men yell at me in Harlem, why would you do that to yourself? There's just so much violence that goes unaddressed because the community at large holds a lot of bigoted beliefs, and it's killing Black trans women. A lot of the Black trans women that we mourn were killed by Black cis men, and that's not a conversation that I think the Black community at large wants to have right now. And so sometimes I feel a need to present myself as hyper feminine or as sexy, as incredibly beautiful, just to make it those few blocks to the subway station, just so I can feel like I can start my day in a safe place.
Okay. Oh, just sound. Okay, guys, I'm gonna replay the video. Luckily, it's not too long. Just give me a moment. I'm sorry about that. Okay. All right.
As a trans woman of color, you're constantly relearning how to live in this world. Like every day feels like a new experience. And a lot of times as a trans woman of color, I don't feel safe. And it kind of shapes the way that I move through the rest of the city. I've had like Black men yell at me in Harlem, like, why would you do that to yourself? There's just so much violence that goes unaddressed because the community at large holds a lot of bigoted beliefs, and it's killing Black trans women. A lot of the Black trans women that we mourn were killed by Black cis men, and that's not a conversation that I think the Black community at large wants to have right now. And so sometimes I feel a need to present myself as hyper feminine or as sexy, as incredibly beautiful, just to make it those few blocks to the subway station, just so I can feel like I can start my day in a safe place.
All right. So let's get started. First, let's just talk about TERNT. When did the TERNT study begin? Who started it? And what was the goal behind it?
So TERNT started in 2018. The grant was submitted in 2018 by Dr. Dustin Duncan at the time at NYU, but currently we're at Columbia. And the TERNT study was aiming to find out how neighborhoods, networks, and relationships impacted the health of trans women of color in New York City.
So how did TERNT get in touch with the local trans community in general and also for this project?
Well, I am a part of the trans community and I'm a member of the TERNT team, and I joined the team really early on, like as soon as the grant was accepted. And from there, we started speaking to community leaders, building a community advisory board of trans women of color who are very experienced in working with trans communities, who've been organizing and leading their own institutions for many of them over 10 years. And then Gia, who is the other project coordinator for TERNT, came on to the team later, and she also was really instrumental in helping us build our large community of trans women of color who know about our work. So we did a lot of going to balls and going to different community events, health fairs and things like that, to get in touch with the community and let them know who we were and what we were doing.
Thanks. I'd love to talk about how TERNT and Patients in Purpose ended up teaming up. Like how exactly did your two teams get in touch? I would love to hear about the initial thoughts that TERNT had and that Patients in Purpose might have had about the work that you guys were gonna put together at the beginning.
Yeah, so my dear friend Denton, who's also on the TERNT research team, he reached out to me asking for a logo, a website, and a postcard to really help support the study. And I felt so honored and like excited to be able to work on this because it's such an important cause for me. And I knew that others at the agency also felt the same way. And because our agency is so passionate about putting people and patients first, I knew that we could create this larger campaign to help support the study and really bring awareness to the cause. So, you know, wanted a logo, ended up with a bunch of videos, beautiful website, and everything else to help support as much as we possibly could.
Yeah, the work is so gorgeous. Like I even saw someone already commented like beautiful shot in the audience. It's just really, really great to look at. And the stories themselves are really powerful. And I when I was like looking through everything, I started thinking, you know, I wish I was like a fly in the room when this work started, when like the conversations for this work first started. and because of that, I'm wondering like if anyone can share what it was like in the room and in those meetings at the beginning, those first discussions about the campaign when you guys, for example, Patrick, when you guys realized, hey, there's so much more we can do than just what they've asked for. I'd love to hear about the energy in that room and what really inspired that conversation and what really got that conversation to bring it to the point where we got this awesome campaign.
Yeah, so I you know, as basic as it might sound, I've always been like a really huge fan of Paris is Burning, the show Pose, and everything really around that surrounds the ball culture. So that's like immediately where my head went. I remember pulling swipe of ball culture imagery and building out this mood board for what I thought the campaign could look like. Something I realized that was pretty inaccurate of the entire community, and now looking back on it in hindsight. So I think like, you know, Nora and I kind of like threw ideas back and forth, and we realized we really needed to like listen to the community rather than putting out like what we wanted the campaign to be.
And how did that, I would say that that's probably like one of the most important things, right? When coming up with a campaign or any type of message that's specific to a specific audience and community, it's really important to lead with that. I know for not necessarily looking for you to out anyone, but like I know that internally, the team itself, to make the best work, would have to have some degree of reflection of the audience that they're working towards. So I just wanted to know if anyone on the panel can talk about how the team itself was built, right? How people were chosen or decided to volunteer to join the team, and what that looked like.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, with anything at the agency that we start throwing out, especially in the nonprofit realm, we wait for people to raise their hands of people who are passionate to work on it. We had a lot of hand raisers, people of color, queer, trans, who wanted to throw down on these concepts. And so that was really important for us to make sure that the team was mixed. And then also everything that we were creating was going back to the Turnt team to gut check, you know, how it was feeling and relevant to the community. And like Patrick was saying, we all had ideas of what would be fun to create or kind of beautiful things to do, but it was really kind of gut checking back in of like, how is this relevant? How can we make this interesting and exciting? And what is representing the community, not what we think. And also it might not make sense to some of our audience, and that's fine because it's talking directly to that community. And that was those kind of learning curves that we wanted to bring into the discussion and into the work.
Your mention of learning curves just got me very excited. I'm very much a process geek, so I love for you to talk more, for anyone else on the panel to talk more about what it was like to kind of join in and have a certain amount of knowledge, and then over time really build that out and use that knowledge to create the work that you did. And at the same time, I would love to hear from Jordan about how that in the early parts of planning the campaign, how that work coming from Patients and Purpose was received by the Turnt team, and just if you guys could all just like kind of chuck in there how it worked out, how I guess reviews worked, if you will. You don't have to get boring, but share just how at the beginning knowledge and learning interacted with the work itself and the outputs.
I think initially in the creative process, what we really started feeling, and, you know, when you are building a campaign, you use something, we call it like swipe, you know, where you're just like pulling images online and using stuff to represent what you're eventually going to shoot. And what we started feeling, especially with this project that I had never felt as acutely in other ones, was that using, you know, cis women to represent this stuff was not working. Like it was feeling uncomfortable. And it just, all of us, we would look at the swipe and look at the stuff that we were pulling, and it just didn't have the correct feel. And it felt like appropriation almost, like immediately, like it wasn't right. And I think that is what led us to find Spencer and the work that he was doing, and Ted, who was our amazing director for this as well, because Spencer was already actively shooting trans women of color, and his photographs were so beautiful, and it was something that just wasn't in the space. And not to put words in his mouth, but that's why he started shooting that, because there wasn't those images in the space. And so I think that was the thing that we started realizing right away, was that the more authentic and real, even in that stage of concepting, the images were, the more right on the campaign was feeling.
Yeah, and from the Turnt perspective, I think we were just really excited that we were getting so much. We didn't go in expecting to have like a whole video campaign and these photographs. I certainly wasn't expecting to be a model in these. campaigns. So it was just a really exciting time, and I think that Patience and Purpose was really receptive to the things that we had to say, and took it in a direction that worked for both of us really well.
So Spencer, I'm going to ask you some questions about your photography in a second, but I first wanted to just say, like, I know for a lot of people, not necessarily for the trans woman of color community and the Black trans women community is a very specific community. But I know across the board when people at agencies especially are planning something for an audience they're not the most familiar with, it gets a little stressful and a little scary. And so I asked that question to kind of get an understanding of how everybody on the team was able to balance accepting that they might not have the knowledge base that they want with a desire to make work that would stand for the cause and Turnt itself. So that's why I asked that question. I think that oftentimes we get nervous and we end up not just saying, okay, we'll just change the audience, or we'll just do this really low reaching, easy way to talk to this audience, rather than really leaning into it and learning about who we're talking with and learning about who we're working with. And so I think that's one of the things that when it came to Patience and Purpose and Turnt's collaboration that really, really worked for you guys, was making sure that the client team, the Turnt team, and the Patience and Purpose team were both kind of working together to educate each other while making the work, rather than taking in a certain amount of knowledge and being like, I know what I need to know, and getting the work done. So that's kind of why I asked that question. Wanted to make sure that I made that clear to everybody listening. But Spencer, I know, and I'm not even a creative, I'm a strategist, but like looking for swipe that is representative of most people in the world outside of the norm of white, cis, hetero people is really, really hard. You can't, it's really just difficult to find that imagery. And it's only recently that different groups and different organizations have started to really consciously bulk up that queue, if you will. So I'd love to hear about what made you start this photography, and like what you thought, what you felt when Patience and Purpose and the Turnt team reached out to you.
Well, I began shooting members of the trans community in 2018. And that was in a reaction to what the Trump administration and these constant horrifying stories of violence on the community. I wanted to do something. I wanted to do what I could. And I thought, I can take these humanist photos that are not commercial, not sexual, not exploitative, and show these people as humans, which I do for most of my portraiture. And so as I began shooting some of the women, they started recommending me to friends. And, I became known as a safe photographer. And initially I was just giving these photographs to people and saying, thank you for this collaboration of allowing to sit for me. And here's a print. And use these photos how you will. Eventually, I was showing this and another body of work of portraits to a friend, and she approached Playboy. And Playboy did a story on me and my work, which came out. And then 3 months later, I got a call from Nora and Patrick and told me about the project, and I was honored. And luckily, the campaign itself really vibed with my personal style. And I believe in Turnt, and I believe that this can create social change. So it was a good fit.
Thank you. So let's talk now a little bit more specifically about LGBTQ focused ad campaigns themselves. I would love to talk to everybody who practices allyship on this team to talk about what it was like to make sure that it was a truly inclusive experience from a perspective of someone who isn't necessarily a part of the group being served or being spoken to.
Yeah, I mean, I know that we were kind of saying this at the beginning, but that key point of listening, of just like shutting up and listening. And I think that's that piece of allyship, of paying attention and listening and then taking action to support, like it's the two sides. You can't just sit and hear, you have to do something with it. So, similar to Spencer wanting to take his skill set and use that to move forward the cause, similarly as us as creatives wanting to take what we can do with what we have and give that a voice. But I think that with anything like that, it has to be that you are pulled back. Ego or any of those other things or those preconceived notions has to take a back seat to what it's serving. And I think that that's something that's built into designers in a way. You know, you are serving a community, and so that community has to get something out of what's going on, and you have to be able to shift your mindset to accompany that. And I think that that's even more important in communities that don't have a voice.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
Julian.
Yeah.
Oh, Julian,
Awesome,
hello.
Yay.
Hey, sorry, I was having a lot of connection issues, so thank you everyone for your patience. But Nora, I just wanted to jump in because I think you bring up a really important point about being open and being able to shift, and I think that was a big part of the process when we were creating this campaign. Like Patrick kind of spoke to earlier, you know, we had these ideas, and even me being, you know, a trans man of color, I thought I knew what this campaign would look like, and I had a lot of preconceived notions going in, but I really had to check myself because even as a member of the trans community, I'm not a trans woman of color. I don't know that unique experience. And as we began to get further into the process, and when we discovered Spencer's work and we sort of decided we were going to do a video campaign, you know, it's almost like the campaign kind of revealed itself to us in a way that I haven't experienced on other campaigns. Like, for instance, you know, with a lot of the headlines that we have, we actually pulled that from the interview footage, from the interviews we had with these women, because we really wanted their voice to shine. We didn't want this to feel like this was some outside entity speaking for this community. We wanted this campaign to be about these women, amplifying the voices of these women and allowing the community, you know, to speak to each other.
Yeah, I think to echo that, like it's really just about getting out of your own way and making sure that the people that you're creating a campaign for are in the room with you. So that I think is just something that we, you know, to Julian's point, you know, it's a lot of the creative that came out of this was directly lifted from the words of these women. So I think that was super important.
Those were some of the most powerful interviews, and everybody in the campaign was so articulate. And we actually did them in a different room. Ted and I sat, Ted the cinematographer, and we were able to have this dialogue and ask these questions, and we got so much footage. I mean, what Jordan said, it was so beautiful and powerful, and it was amazing to be part of that.
Yeah, I think that Spencer and Ted created, they have a beautiful working space in Williamsburg that their studio's in, and the space there was so kind of, it was the hottest day of the year and there was no air conditioning, and everyone, you know, it was like this, it wasn't like the ideal environmental space, right? You know, like, but the actual space that was created, Jordan and Gia were there, so that every woman that came in saw a face that they were comfortable with and familiar with and knew. And all the women were just immediately very open and wanting to be part of the process and very vulnerable in a way that just, it did feel a lot like magic was happening when we were doing it. It felt very special there. I think we all felt very connected and kind of energized by what was going on. I think also, you know, Spencer and Ted did the interviews just with audio so that there was no camera on while they were talking and kind of sharing their stories. And I think that also led to more intimacy and to more feeling like they were kind of safe to expose themselves a little bit. And then when they got in front of the camera, they got to perform and kind of show off and show more of their personalities in those ways. And that's why I think the video pieces feel so personal, because we're getting this kind of outside exposure of them and kind of showing themselves with this kind of inner monologue going at the same time, which is a really beautiful balance and shows, I think, the sensitivity of the subject, and also shows a woman in a really beautiful way as well.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. I would say that I'm so glad that, Nora, that you talked about how the videos were actually constructed. And that's such a good insight to have, because when I was watching those videos as a trans person who knows a lot of trans people, it felt so, real and honest. And I say that because there's this like dissonance or dichotomy, if you will, between what people see from a trans person and what is inside for a lot of us, right? There's this internal strife and fear, which was kind of stated in those videos. But then at the same time, there's this almost this need to make sure that the public face is put together in a certain way, not just to be happy, but to literally keep us safe. And so when I saw those videos, I honestly didn't know what it was that made me feel that way until you actually articulated that. And I think that's like something that's very specific to, I guess, me, but also I think a lot of people can probably find a way to relate to that. The idea that the inside, what's inside of you and what you present to the world might not always align. And so that, I'm so glad that you guys shared that. That was really, really fun, frankly, to hear about. I guess we've kind of touched on this a little bit in the last few minutes, but I would love for us to keep talking a little bit about making sure that not just the teams that were building this campaign were inclusive, but also the talent or the women themselves that that you interviewed. And then further on, like in terms of where the work was flighted, if you will, where did it live? Who was involved in deciding what kind of work we would make? I would love to just hear about how having a team that was actually inclusive and a group of people working on this that really reflected different identities led to the full-on output that came from this. Because for me, I think the biggest thing about this is like the passion is so clear in the work. That's what I think really made it.
I can talk a little bit about like the selection of the models. So Jan and I handpicked most of the models from our personal networks, and we wanted them to be representative of the cohort of women that Turn is seeking to serve. So at the time, that was exclusively Black and Latinx trans women. It's now expanded to all trans women of color. And so in the campaign, you can see that the women are Black and Latinx, and we also wanted a variety of sizes and ages, because we really wanted to make sure that everyone felt welcome in Turn and that everyone knew that we cared about their health and that their health mattered to us.
Yeah, and I think for the output and what we were doing, it really was, you know, we knew that the requirements of Turn was that they had a website that was functioning so that women could enroll in the program, that they had some printed materials for balls and to pass out, the logo for shirts and like things like that. And then really the video work and all of that was leading into what is going to be rolling out more into the social campaign as it goes forward online. But a lot of the assets, again, was because Spencer and Ted were both donating their time. It was, how much can you guys make? What do you want to make? You know, like, and it was, and you know, obviously their passion for it was coming through and what was going on. And I think that was the piece of, we were like, just how many videos can we do? How much stuff can we do? And then where can we be placing them? So the website then got to grow a little bit more to be beyond just enrollment form. It got to be a place where the stories of the women could live, where the videos could live. And then we're kind of rolling out the social channels and stuff like that as we move forward with Turn.
I think another important piece that we tried to make sure when we were creating output and assets for this campaign was making sure that we had consent from all of the models and the way that we use them and sort of the stuff that was going out. Again, just to make sure, you know, they felt like they had some control of the image that was being put out there, because representation, particularly of trans women, can, you know, get into this place of exploitation and you know, we wanted to make sure that they felt that, you know, they had a say in their image and their videos.
Yeah, every woman got final sign off on all imagery and got to see the posters and everything before anything went live to make sure that everything was feeling that there was something that they were proud to put out into the world.
That's awesome. I think usually that's just not what happens with talent. Like usually you shoot and then you never hear from it again until you see it on the internet somewhere. So I think that last part, that sign off from every single person involved, not just the creative teams and the agency teams and the clients, but actually the people in the work itself. That's actually a really great thing to think about consent in that way. I think that what is really exciting, just from a like general ad maker view, is seeing so many different trans women of color in creative work. Like just the knowledge, the proof, honestly, the proof that these people exist and they are more than capable of being a part of any piece of advertising output. I think that Patience and Purpose and Turnt really did a great job of proving that out. I feel like a lot of the times when we're looking for talent for a commercial or spot of something of that sort, it's often a space where there's fear that we might not, for example, if you don't use a professional model who has a lot of experience, then they won't be able to perform in XYZ ways. Or if you use someone who might have too many identities that seem a little divisive, if you will, that might affect the work in a negative way. And I think what was great about this work was that it just kind of proved out the point that, one, the talent actually does exist. The talent is there. When we're building ad campaigns of any type for any brand, any product, I think it's always important to just always think about who is in the work and are the people in the work reflective of the actual community that you're trying to speak with. There's so many times I've heard people say there just aren't enough like trans people of color that are talented that we can put in an ad. And then I just watched these videos and I saw, hey, actually there are lots of trans people of color who can be in an ad. So I say all that, I wanted to make sure I pointed that out for everyone listening to know that if anyone has the power to determine what talent, who is representing a brand or someone in a piece of creative work, it is your responsibility to really look deeply for people that can really reflect the world and the community that you're speaking to. And I'd love for everyone to just always remember that, hey, like the Turnt campaign existed and they actually, in New York City only, not even globally or in the country, they found talent. So I'm getting off my high horse now, but I really wanted to make sure I explicitly said that. Before we jump into like more future thinking conversation, I would just want the rest of the panel to just kind of say anything that we might not have touched upon just as yet about the process and that initial outreach and the whole shoot and post-production process. So if anyone has anything they wanted to mention, feel free to do so now.
Yeah, so, go for it.
Okay, I think that visibility can create social change, and I think it's very imperative right now with what's going on that artists and creatives are able to work along with people and use that activism in a constructive way that's not dominated by commercialization or the same misogynistic viewpoint that has dominated culture for so long.
I don't know how to follow that. From like a production perspective, you know, we were going back and forth with the videos on whether or not to use music or not use music. And, you know, we realized like these words are so much more powerful that they didn't need, you know, something to kind of like hide any issues that might come up. You know, we usually use music to either like create emotion or, you know, make up for something that may not have been said. And we realized that the words here were just so powerful on their own that music was just like completely unnecessary. And that was something really, really beautiful and interesting to see, because that in my experience, you know, we always turn to music as like that backup. And here we didn't have to. And it was just such an amazing experience to hear those amazing words and just let them, you know, speak for themselves.
To piggyback off of Patrick's point, I think, you know, in advertising, we focus so much on storytelling. And I think with some campaigns, sometimes we have a tendency to overproduce those stories. And I think with this campaign, we really like had to let those stories speak for themselves and let these women speak for themselves. And again, be really open to the process of how all these things were created. And I think that's one of the things that sort of made this campaign so rewarding to work on and you know, made it that we have such, you know, beautiful assets and stuff out in the world.
Great. Okay, so let's hop into the part that I think a lot of people in the audience have been waiting for. before Q&A. I know you guys are really waiting for Q&A, but let's talk a little bit about advice, right? What advice do you guys have for anyone at any other agency or in-house or at a brand who is working on a campaign that features members of the LGBTQ community? And if you want to get specific, feel free to just focus on the trans community. I would love for anyone to share any like quick or long advice on the best ways to start a process like this.
I mean, I think one of the best things that we did was find Spencer and Ted to work on this. And I think that reaching out to the community, reaching out to your community. I mean, we had never met them before. And Patrick, you know, slid into Spencer's DMs and was like, please, can we get on a phone call? You know, and I think that is like that type of reach out, I think is really important, you know, finding people that you are excited about and whose talent you admire and wanting to work together. And I think that for the most part, that has been really positive to be able to give, you know, both opportunities to people you would never get to work with. A lot of times at agencies, you're sent the same books of portfolios of photographers or things like that from connections from someone that they know, you know, and I think that my feeling is I always try and find someone who I'm inspired by separately and reach out and kind of try to pull them in so that more people are getting opportunities to share their work and to work, and that we're not always doing the same rote thing. And so I think that with any campaign and wherever you're working, it's kind of finding more people to bring in and more, again, like Patrick was saying earlier, more seats at the table, more people to come in outside of networks that already exist, because amazing, outstanding work is being produced all around the world. And there's that opportunity to really, to bring that in and to tell better stories and to show better representation of people in all of your work.
For sure. And to that point of, you know, having more people in the room, my piece of advice would be listen, and listen some more. Make sure you have people in the room who can represent or at least, you know, provide some perspective from the communities that you're trying to reach or trying to speak to. You know, I think with this campaign, it was kind of built into our process that we were getting feedback from women in the actual community. But I would say to other, you know, people working on a campaign where maybe that's not as feasible, definitely take the time to try and find people from, you know, whatever network, wherever you can, whether it be social media, to you know, get some feedback, to get someone else's perspective, because I think that's so important, and that just makes the work more authentic in the end.
Yeah, I think to that point also is, you know, we as creatives, we try to like control so much to really like create what our vision is. And it's okay to really like loosen that control a little bit, like, and go into it with an outline of what you want to accomplish rather than exactly like word for word what you want the talent to say. And in this instance, you know, we had an outline, we had questions, but we really just had the questions just kind of like flow like a normal conversation. And because of that, I think that's why we have all this beautiful footage that just feels so much more real.
Thank you, everyone. Just one more question in terms of the campaign's future. I know that Nora kind of mentioned that there will be some social components to it. I'd love to just hear a little bit more about what people can expect from Turn and Patience and Purpose in this year. And then furthermore, before we dig into the Q&A, just if anyone can share, or if no one wants to, I can give some points, if you will. But if anyone can share some tips for what allies can do to support trans women of color, not just today or during, you know, Trans Day of Remembrance, but around the year-round in perpetuity.
Yeah, so TURNT is currently on hold as a study because of COVID-19 and also because of some other things that were going on before. So we are waiting to relaunch the study, but when we do relaunch, it will be in a more socially distant way. And so the campaign will be even more useful and even more impactful. And so we'll be relaunching on social media within the next few months. We're really excited about that. And to answer your second question, I think that there is so much happening, so much organizing happening in the trans community, and there's so many ways to support. The most important way is financially, of course. If anyone can share and give to the trans community, that is always so impactful. And there are a lot of initiatives happening right now, like For the Girls, which pays for rent for Black trans women. There is the HAF project, which is a project that's new to help support Black trans women get tested for COVID-19 and get care packages delivered by other trans women. The Okra Project provides food and funds to Black trans women. Black Trans Travel Fund also provides free Uber or Lyft rides for Black trans women to get to where they need to go safely. And also, the BTFA Collective is a collective of Black trans artists, and they do a lot of amazing work, open mic nights. There's a virtual talk show happening right now, and there's just a lot of ways to support the community. So please do if you can.
Thank you, Jordan. If no one has anything else to add, I'll hop into the Q&A that people have been asking a lot of questions avidly. So I'll get jumping. I'll give you guys like 5 seconds to say, Blake, I want to say something. Great. Okay. So Jordan, you mentioned it at the beginning of this conversation, but a lot of people want to know more detail about how you recruited women for the study and how you recruited women for the campaign, and any feedback that you might have received from the community about the ways that recruitment was done.
So we had like a very varied recruitment strategy for the current study. Like I said, we would go to balls and parties that we knew that trans women would be at. We would go to organizations that we knew trans women would frequent. We would post flyers and give out postcards at those organizations. A lot of organizations were really crucial in that work, including CK Life, which is a health clinic for trans people, and Trans Latinx Network, which is a trans Latina run organization that provides a lot of services to the community. So we went to their support groups, and we would they have an outreach program where they go to different clubs in Queens, and so we went with them to do that. And really, whenever we were around, we tried to make a different study. G and I are very involved in the community, and so we had a lot of opportunity to speak to other Black trans women. So a lot of what we did was using our own personal networks, using our own social media to promote the study. And as for we mostly recruited, like I said, out of our social networks. Almost everyone is someone that Heather G or I knew personally, and most of them actually I've gotten closer to since shooting the campaign with them. We also look through Instagram to get more inspiration and to get connections. I reached out to my friend Yari Jones, who's a very well-known Black trans model. It was just featured in like the Calvin Klein Pride ad, and she connected me with other folks as well. So it was just like a really grassroots community effort to launch the campaign.
I was just about to say that. Like, it sounds like this was just a full-on grassroots effort to not just build the campaign, but to launch it and put it out into the world. And given the COVID's effects on everything, like that grassroots spirit is just going to continue, it sounds like, with this. I think that there's something super powerful about grassroots movements, and that they are built by and fueled by people, and that usually they're built and fueled by the people that they're moving to serve and to help. I think that it's an approach to the work that is used sometimes in advertising, but only, I think, specifically for projects like Turn. I think that there is always potential to use a grassroots approach for planning other things as well when it comes to advertising. I think that I would encourage everybody who's listening to really explore grassroots organizing as a concept, and to see how people are able to congregate and communify is not a word, but make community in a way that's actionable and that is focused on equity. I think that is something that can be reflected not just in work about trans women of color and the lives that they're going through, but in all of the work that we do. And I'm stepping off my soapbox one more time. To just have said that. We have another question from Brett. I'm just going to read it. In many situations, allies of certain groups are expected to play more of a supporting role, letting members of that group lead, avoiding, quote, the white savior complex, so to speak. But in advertising, they say that a great idea can come from anywhere. What happens when the ally, the non-minority, is the one with the solution? Thank you, Brett. That is a question. A loaded question.
Yeah, I mean, I think, obviously, being one of the creative leads and being an ally, you know, like my ideas were not to like claim whose ideas, but like, you know, I think that, you know, Patrick and I were the kind of creative leads working with this with our team of amazing people. And again, we are two of the people, Julian on the phone, three of the people from the agency, but so many people threw down on this concepting and kind of learned to create this. But I do think that that's that piece of, you know, yes, a great idea comes from anywhere, and how to execute it comes from knowledge and understanding and kind of all of those things. But I think that that's where, you know, what Julian was touching on and Patrick, that, you know, we had ideas of where we wanted this to go. And then it really turned into shifting and letting it be led by the models and by the women of what they were saying, what they were giving us, what they were showing. There was a whole back and forth even of, you know, when Spencer shot everything, we were thinking it was all going to be in color, and we had a whole color campaign, and then we started printing out the photos in black and white, and we stood, I think, for a couple hours one day on a wall just trying to figure out what tone of imagery was creating more, and the color was showing more of the women's personalities with their clothes and, you know, and their hair color and everything like that, but the black and white was giving more of that kind of intimate soul feeling. And so I think that those are those pieces of, even if there is one idea of a concept, there's many decision makers that are going throughout that and refining that, and everybody takes part in that piece. And so it's hard to just have it be one sole person who's an ally comes up with someone, or one sole person, you know, it is that mix. But we also had an amazing group of people at the agency throwing down on this and kind of cultivating it and pulling it into the spot that it is right now. And Ted as well, our cinematographer. So again, I know we're just a couple of the people on screen here, but it was a full community effort for sure.
Yeah, I would just like to point out a theme in what you said. And I think it's honestly been kind of a small theme throughout this whole conversation. And it's this idea of like, yes, as Brett mentioned, like an idea can truly come from anywhere. But I think what is important is finding the right moments to elevate the right voices, right? And finding the right time to center the right points of view at the right time. I think that is probably going to be the most important part of trying to navigate, if you will, a brainstorm session filled with people of varying identities and knowledge bases, right? I always tell myself actually to step up or step back depending on where I'm at. And if no one is familiar with that phrase or that idea, step up, step back essentially means like, if you're a person who is very, very vocal, who speaks out a lot, like me, for example, you want to take a step back sometimes and really leave that space for people who might not be so comfortable doing such a thing. So this would largely apply to people that are outgoing, but people that might be more senior as well, who might have more perceived power in the room. And then at the same time, if you're someone who really keeps things close to the vest or likes to think about things for quite a bit before you speak, really pushing yourself really to speak up, or finding an ally in the room who can help you voice what you have on your mind. I think that idea of step up, step back is something that I think every single one of us can really start to implement in how we work. And I think Brett specifically, that idea and that practice can really help navigate, I think, some of the uncertainties that were like laced within the question that you had asked. Okay, let's do another question. We have time for maybe 2 more questions. So how can the design community do a better job at trying to communicate the trans experience?
So I think one of the many things that I love about at Patience and Purpose is that we really do invite patients and people into the creation process, whether it's virtual or in person. So we're not just creating concepts and just like putting them out into the world, like, or testing them in, you know, like the traditional testing models that we're all used to in the industry. But we invite them, you know, whether it's virtual or at the office, and just, you know, find out like what are they feeling, what are they reacting to, like what are their issues that they're going through on a daily basis, so that when we actually, you know, create a campaign, or whether it's a website or a tool, like we're actually addressing their needs and not just speaking to ourselves because we think that that's what they need. So it's really just inviting them along the process. And that's something that I think is super valuable and not done enough within the industry.
I think one of the things that I'm seen in design, at least, that I'm loving it in advertising, is that the channels are becoming less siloed. It's not a straight campaign and a trans campaign and a queer campaign. You're seeing those blended together, and campaigns are made for all audiences, and it's showing more of all audiences. And that doesn't mean that you can't target specific groups and work to raise up and do that stuff. But I love seeing more campaigns where trans and queer are woven into our sphere. So it's more representative of everyone, and that you're seeing those experiences come through, which is really nice to start seeing more brands stretch in that direction and start showing what we're actually seeing out in the world in our advertising.
And I think something important about the collaboration of Visions and Purpose was having Gia and I, and also the women who were in the campaign, able to give their feedback on the images that were chosen. That's something I didn't speak to earlier, but I think that that's more crucial than a lot of people realize. A lot of time in advertising, this has happened to a lot of trans women, including myself. When you shoot a campaign, the people behind the team pick the image that makes you most visibly trans, and that can make you uncomfortable or even unsafe. And so having us be able to choose how we represented ourselves was something that was absolutely crucial.
That actually leads me pretty nicely into the next question. And that is, how does anyone on this call feel about ads that include trans people, very obviously to just hit a mark, but without any purpose to the narrative itself or any purpose in general? I know how I feel about it, but I'm gonna let other people answer the question.
I think, that's where it can get into that place of exploitation, or just these really base level representations of trans women and the trans community as a whole, where it feels like it's for shock value, or, you're just trying to hook people in, but there's no real care or compassion for the story or the person that's being represented. And it doesn't feel like you're representing people, you're just representing sort of an idea or a concept. And I think that also gets into the way trans people are often othered in the society, and we're seen as some sort of, weird on the fringe thing versus real people with, human stories and experiences. So I personally think it's a huge problem. But, to even go back to the previous question, I think all the ways that we've been talking about, especially, Jordan's point, that was so crucial to make sure that we could get feedback, and that all the women who participated had a say in the things that they were in, so that it felt like, they had ownership of the story that was being told. We weren't trying to tell their story. We were trying to give them a vehicle to tell their own story.
Yeah. To go off of that, I think it's also really important to keep in mind the audience. The Turn campaign was really unique in that it was a group of trans women being photographed and videographed for other trans women. But I think that a lot of times when trans people are included in ad campaigns and people aren't cognizant of the audience that they're releasing that to, that can cause a lot of violence for trans people if there's no primer or no conversation with the audience about what transness is and how to appropriately treat trans people that are featured in that campaign. So I think being knowledgeable of your audience and knowledgeable of what bigoted beliefs your audience might have is really important to protect the people that you're working with.
Yeah, I would add that, you just want to make sure that you're not virtue signaling over doing something actively, actually helpful. I think I would say that having a trans person in your ad just to have a trans person in your ad is just as bad, if not worse, than having no trans people in your ad. There is always going to be a necessity for value add, no matter what you do in an advertisement or in any creative output. So if you're putting a trans person in an ad because you need a trans person in your ad, then don't. But if you're putting a trans person in your ad because there are trans people in your community, or your community, trans people in your audience base, or because there are trans people in the world and your ad is supposed to be reflective of the world, then go for it. And make sure you do it in a way that is equitable and truly inclusive. I think that something we haven't touched upon in this conversation is that there is a difference between visibility and inclusivity, right? And representation and inclusivity. You can have people in your ads, but if those people aren't contributing in a way that is beneficial to them and to the people seeing the ad, then there's no point. in my opinion. So that's my 2 cents to that question. We are 5 minutes to 5. So I am going to just leave again, give you guys some time to just jump in. If there's anything anyone wanted to say before this is over, this is your time.
Blake, I just wanted to piggyback off of what you said. I think that's such an important point. Like with any creative decision that we make, I think you have to ask yourself why. Why are you making this decision? Why are you putting this model in or making this execution? I think we can all agree as creatives that doing or making a decision or doing something in a concept just for the sake of doing it is never going to work. It's never going to feel authentic. The work is always going to fall flat. So I think just making sure that you're asking yourself the right questions and making sure that, things have like beyond just a strategic reason, that they have like a conceptual reason, a reason for the storytelling. I think, all of that is really important in the process. And in terms of overall, I think I just want to say, like, working on this, I never imagined, even going into healthcare advertising, that I would be able to work on something, on a campaign like this, something that meant so much to me and that could have such a great impact on a community, obviously, that hits so close to home. So it's truly been one of the most rewarding experiences, and I have so much gratitude, to the team at Patience and Purpose and Patrick and Nora for bringing it to us, and the Turnt team for, allowing us to collaborate with them, and obviously Spencer and Teddy for the amazing work they did. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Julian. Honestly, I thought those were really good words to end on. So, I mean, if anyone wants to add anything, feel free, but I'm also super comfortable ending the conversation here and just thanking everybody who's listening, who joined in. Like, thank you so much for giving us your hour. And to please, like, Google is your best friend. Like, research and look up any questions that you may have, or reach out to me directly on LinkedIn, and I'll be more than happy to help you guys find the resources that you need in trying to be a better ally. So I think people are chatting me saying this is over. So this is definitely over. So thank you. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.